Have you ever noticed how life always seems to change the moment you start to feel comfortable? It's as if the universe has this strange sense of timing, waiting until you finally exhale, until you believe you've found solid ground, and then, without warning, everything shifts. One day you're standing under a clear blue sky. The next, storm clouds gather. A job you thought was secure vanishes. A relationship you trusted crumbles. The health you once took for granted falters. And just like that, the world you built in your mind collapses. We've all felt it. That tight knot in the stomach when the phone rings at an unusual hour. The silent heaviness in the room when bad news arrives. The sudden emptiness when something you relied on disappears. And in those moments, one question rises to the surface. Why does life feel so unstable? Why can't things just stay the way they are? The truth is, the world was never built to stay the same. Nothing in this life, no matter how precious, how powerful, how permanent it may seem, is immune to change. In the ancient teachings of Buddhism, there's a word for this: anicca. It means impermanence, the natural, inescapable reality that everything arises, exists, and fades away. It sounds simple, almost too obvious to matter, but it matters more than most people realize. You see, the cause of so much of our stress, anxiety, and sorrow isn't that life is unpredictable. It's that we expect it to be predictable. We cling to the illusion that we can hold things in place, control outcomes, and build a future immune to loss. And when reality reminds us otherwise, we suffer. There's a story I heard once about a man who lived in a quiet village, blessed with good fortune. He had a beautiful home, a loving family, and steady work. Every morning he would stand on his porch, watching the sun rise over the hills, believing his life was finally in order. But one day, out of nowhere, his world unraveled. A sudden illness took his wife. His business failed. A fire claimed his home, and in his grief, he wandered to the nearby monastery, begging the old master there for wisdom. The master poured him a cup of tea, filling it to the brim until it spilled over. Startled, the man shouted, "Master, it's overflowing." The master smiled and said, "So is your mind, overflowing with expectations of how life should be. Until you empty your cup, you will never taste peace." That lesson stayed with me, because we, too, walk through life carrying cups too full of attachments, too heavy with assumptions. We believe good things will last forever, that bad things won't happen to us, that we can somehow outsmart uncertainty. But the truth is, no one escapes it. Not kings, not beggars, not you, not me. Even the mountains crumble, even the stars burn out. And strangely, when you stop resisting that fact, a kind of freedom appears. Not a freedom that removes uncertainty, but one that makes peace with it. The Buddha spoke of this many times. He described the human experience as a bubble in a stream, a flash of lightning in a summer cloud, a phantom, a dream. Not to make us despair, but to wake us up. To remind us that because nothing lasts forever, every moment carries a kind of sacred weight. The laugh of a child, the warmth of the sun on your face, the sound of rain at night. These things are beautiful not in spite of their impermanence, but because of it. When we realize nothing is guaranteed, we begin to cherish what we have while we have it. And so, this is where our journey begins. Not in chasing a life free of change, but in learning to live gracefully within it. To find our footing on ground that's always moving. To discover a kind of peace that isn't dependent on circumstances, but rises from within. Because the storms will come, the tides will turn, but there's a way to remain steady even when the world feels like it's falling apart. A quiet strength hidden beneath the noise. You might not see it yet, but it's there. And as we continue, we'll explore where to find it, and how to hold it close when everything else slips through your fingers. It's a curious thing. For all the wisdom we may gather about life's impermanence, for all the lessons written in ancient texts and whispered by old monks beneath candlelight, our hearts still tighten when the winds of change begin to blow. Why is that? Why do we fear it so deeply? Why, even knowing that nothing stays the same, Do we cling so desperately to what feels familiar? The answer, in many ways, lies in one simple truth. We're addicted to the illusion of control. From the moment we enter this world, we begin weaving a story about how things should be. We tell ourselves, if I work hard, I'll be safe. If I stay in this relationship, I'll be loved forever. If I avoid risk, nothing bad will happen. And slowly, thread by thread, we build this invisible web around us, a sense of order, a belief that we are steering the ship. But life doesn't care about the maps we draw in our minds. A friend moves away. A job is lost. A loved one grows ill. A storm tears through your town. And suddenly, the neat, organized world you built begins to unravel. In those moments, fear rushes in. Not just because things are changing, but because it threatens the story you've told yourself. It strips away the comforting lie that you were ever fully in control. And that is terrifying. Because in truth, control is the most seductive illusion we possess. It makes us feel powerful. It quiets the restless parts of us that whisper about chaos in the night. It convinces us that if we just try harder, plan better, worry more, we can outrun uncertainty. But deep down, part of you knows. You can feel it in those quiet, sleepless hours. In the moments when something unexpected reminds you that everything can change in an instant. And perhaps that's why change scares us. Because it reveals a truth we work so hard to avoid. There's an old saying from the Zen tradition: the tighter you hold, the more it slips away. Imagine grasping water in your hands. The harder you squeeze, the faster it runs through your fingers. Life is no different. The more we cling to people, outcomes, routines, the more suffering we invite. Because when, not if, those things shift, we're left broken, confused, desperate to piece the old world back together. And yet, here's where something beautiful happens. The moment we stop clinging, the moment we let go of needing life to fit our script, we begin to discover a freedom we never imagined. Not the reckless freedom of having no cares, but the steady, quiet freedom of knowing that while we cannot control the waves, we can learn to move with them. The Buddha taught that much of our suffering comes not from pain itself, but from our resistance to it, from our endless battle against the natural ebb and flow of existence. Change isn't the enemy. Our refusal to accept it is. And when we understand this, not just in our minds, but in our bones, the grip of fear begins to loosen. It's not that fear vanishes overnight. No, fear is part of being human, but it loses its power to control us. It becomes something we can witness rather than drown in. And this is where the real work begins. Not in trying to predict or prevent the storms of life, but in learning how to remain grounded when they arrive. Because no matter how carefully you plan, no matter how tightly you hold on, things will fall apart. And in their falling, there's a hidden invitation. An invitation to rediscover what lies beneath the illusions. To find out who you are when the titles, possessions, and stories are stripped away. What remains when everything you thought you needed is gone? Most people spend their entire lives avoiding that question, running from it, distracting themselves with work, relationships, ambitions. But you're here now listening. And that means something. It means you're ready to stop chasing control and start seeking something deeper. A steadiness that exists not because life is predictable, but because you've learned to stop demanding that it be. As we move forward, we'll explore how to cultivate this groundedness, this unshakable peace, even as the ground beneath us shifts. Because while the world around you may change and your circumstances may rise and fall, there's a stillness waiting to be found in the very heart of uncertainty. And it might be closer than you think. So here we are, somewhere between knowing we can't control life and learning to live with that truth. It's a strange space to occupy, isn't it? Like standing on a cliff's edge, one part of you terrified of the drop, the other drawn to the endless sky beyond it. And in that space, the question inevitably rises. If I can't control the world around me, then what do I hold on to? Where do I place my roots when everything keeps shifting? The answer is simpler than you might think. You find your center, Not the false center built on titles, possessions, or fleeting relationships, but the quiet, steady core that exists beyond those things. The part of you untouched by circumstance. The part that remains, even when your carefully constructed life falls apart. And here's the truth no one tells you. Most people have never met that part of themselves. They've spent so long chasing external anchors, careers, achievements, approval, that when those are stripped away, they feel hollow, adrift. But you have the chance to be different. To build a life not around what you have, but around who you are. To plant your roots not in the ever-changing soil of the outside world, but deep within the quiet earth of your own being. This is what it means to be grounded. It's not about pretending life doesn't hurt, not about ignoring disappointment, loss, or uncertainty. It's about learning how to stand in the storm, not as someone invincible, but as someone unshaken. A tree is not strong because the wind never blows. It's strong because its roots run deep, and so must yours. But how do you find your center? What does it actually look like in the chaos of modern life? Sometimes it's as simple as your breath, that gentle, constant rise and fall in your chest. The one thing you carry with you from the first moment you arrive to the last breath you'll take. In moments of overwhelm, when your thoughts race, your pulse quickens, your world feels like it's tilting, come back to it. Feel it. Notice it. Because while the mind invents 1,000 fears, the breath speaks only truth. Other times, it's the earth beneath your feet, the feeling of gravity holding you steady when nothing else will. Try it now, wherever you are. Notice the weight of your body resting against the chair, the floor, the ground. That quiet force reminding you, you're here, you're still here. And sometimes, it's a memory, a teaching, a quiet phrase whispered to yourself in the dark. This too shall pass, not as a dismissal of pain, but as a gentle reminder that everything, joy, sorrow, fear, uncertainty, is a wave. And waves are meant to rise and fall. To stay grounded is to remember you are the ocean, not the wave, the awareness behind every experience, the steady presence that remains, whether the surface is calm or stormy. And here's the beautiful irony. The more you stop grasping for stability outside yourself, the more stable you become. You stop chasing approval, stop clinging to outcomes, stop measuring your worth by how well life follows your plan. And in that space, you find something the world can't give you and therefore can't take away. A steadiness, a kind of quiet courage, not loud, not dramatic, but unshakable. And you realize, you don't need to control the storm to find peace within it. The monks of old knew this well. They spoke of sitting still while the winds howled, letting thoughts and fears pass like clouds overhead. Not fighting them, not feeding them, simply noticing and returning to the stillness underneath. That's your center, and it's been waiting for you. The storms will still come, the waves will still rise, but now you know where to stand. And in the chapters ahead, we'll walk deeper into this practice. How to nurture that groundedness in everyday life. How to carry it into your relationships, your work, your moments of doubt. Because finding your center isn't a one-time discovery. It's a lifelong remembering, and every day, every single day, is an invitation to come home to it. There's a beautiful truth we often forget. Life doesn't pause for us to find peace. It won't clear a path for our stillness. The world will always be loud, messy, unpredictable, and yet we're asked to remain steady in the middle of it. It sounds impossible, doesn't it? But here's where the old wisdom comes alive. Not in monasteries high on misty mountains, but right here, in the middle of traffic, deadlines, crying babies, and phones that won't stop ringing. Because the heart of mindfulness isn't about escaping life. It's about meeting life exactly as it is. Right now, in this very breath, in this very moment. You don't need a candle-lit room. You don't need an hour of perfect silence. What you need is attention, because attention is sacred. It transforms ordinary moments into holy ones. It turns a sip of tea into a ceremony, a conversation into a chance to truly listen, a walk to the mailbox into a moving meditation. The chaos around you doesn't need to disappear. You just need to be fully present in the middle of it. Let's make this practical. Start small. Right now, wherever you are, notice 5 things you can hear. Maybe the hum of your device, the sound of distant traffic, your own breathing. Then notice 5 things you can see: the light in the room, the pattern of the ceiling, a shadow moving across the floor. Feel your body, the way your feet touch the ground, the air against your skin. This is mindfulness. It's not some grand, complicated ritual. It's simply remembering to be where you are. Because most of us, we're not here. We're reliving what went wrong yesterday, or rehearsing what might go wrong tomorrow. And while we're lost in those imaginary worlds, life is quietly happening right here without us. But every time you catch yourself drifting, every time you return to this moment, no matter how messy or loud it is, you build strength. You plant your roots a little deeper. Mindfulness doesn't mean your mind won't wander. It means you notice when it does and gently bring it back. And you'll need to do it 1,000 times a day. And that's okay. That's the practice. In fact, the real power of mindfulness isn't in perfection. It's in persistence. In remembering over and over that peace is not the absence of noise but the presence of awareness. When you wash the dishes, wash the dishes. Feel the water. Notice the warmth. Hear the clink of plates. Smell the soap. When you walk, just walk. Feel the weight of your body moving through space. Notice the way your feet meet the ground. When someone speaks to you, listen with your whole being, not waiting to reply, not half present while your mind races ahead, just there, fully there. Because that's how life is meant to be lived. Not in the abstract future, not in the regrets of the past, but right here. And slowly, something beautiful happens. The chaos loses its power over you. Not because it disappears, but because you're no longer fighting it. You stop resisting what is. And in that space, you find a kind of ease. You realize you can't control the noise, but you can choose where you place your attention. And where your attention goes, your life follows. This is why the ancient teachers spoke of mindfulness not as a luxury, but as survival. A way to stay awake in a world that numbs. A way to stay grounded in a world that pulls. And in those tiny, ordinary moments of presence, you begin to reclaim yourself. Not as someone seeking to escape life's storms, but as someone learning to dance in the rain. And the beauty is, no one even needs to know you're practicing. It's a quiet rebellion, a silent strength. Because while others chase peace in the next weekend, the next purchase, the next escape, you'll have already found it here, in this breath, in this pause, in this now. And this, my friend, is how you begin to live awake, not someday, not when life calms down, but right here, right now. And as you continue to weave these small acts of mindfulness into the fabric of your days, you'll notice something else too. The fear, the anxiety, the restlessness, they don't grip you the same way, because presence softens them. Awareness dissolves them, and like mist in morning light, they slowly fade. You won't be perfect. You won't always remember. But you'll remember more often. And that's enough. That's more than enough. Because this isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you already are. And as you carry this practice forward into tomorrow's worries and next week's surprises, you'll realize something quietly extraordinary. You've been standing on solid ground all along. And as we move ahead, we'll explore how this steady awareness transforms not only our inner world, but how we move through the outer one. How it shapes our relationships, our choices, our capacity to meet both joy and suffering with an open heart. But for now, just this breath, just this moment, you're here, and that's enough. There's a quiet ache most of us carry, a longing to hold on, to people, to moments, to the way we think things should be. We cling tightly to what we love, to our plans, to our identities, to our sense of control. And yet life keeps teaching us the same lesson: nothing lasts. No relationship, no feeling, no possession, no season. Everything by its very nature is fleeting. But rather than flow with this truth, we fight it. We grip harder. We mourn what hasn't even ended yet. We exhaust ourselves trying to freeze what was never meant to stay. And in that struggle, we suffer. The Buddha spoke of this so simply. Attachment is the root of suffering. But what if letting go isn't about giving up? What if it's about setting yourself free? You see, letting go doesn't mean you stop loving. It doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop clinging. It means you learn to hold life with open hands, to cherish what you have while it's here, and to release it with grace when it's time. Because trying to trap a moment is like trying to catch sunlight in your fist. The tighter you squeeze, the less you hold. Non-attachment isn't cold. It's not distant. It's not detachment. It's clarity. It's understanding that love is not possession, joy is not control, and peace is not about having but about being. And in practice, it's not always easy. It shows up in the small places, when a conversation doesn't go the way you hoped, when a plan falls apart, when a loved one chooses a path you don't understand. It shows up in the big places too, when you lose someone, when a season of your life ends, when the identity you built for years no longer fits, and in those moments you have a choice, to resist, or to release, to clutch at what's slipping through your fingers, or to let it fall and trust that life will offer something new in its place. The art of non-attachment asks us to loosen the grip, not to stop caring, but to stop controlling, to stop believing we can hold life still, because life isn't meant to be still, it's meant to move. And the more you practice this, the lighter you feel. You begin to realize how heavy you've been carrying things, old regrets, past relationships, expectations of who you thought you'd be by now. And you start to ask yourself, what would it feel like to lay this down? What if you could love without owning, give without expecting, grieve without drowning, hope without demanding? What if you could meet each moment, each person, each breath, as it is, not as you wish it would be? That's freedom, and no one can give it to you. You claim it in the quiet, ordinary moments when you choose to soften your grip. Maybe it begins with forgiving someone, not for them, but for yourself. Maybe it's letting go of an old version of you that no longer feels true. Maybe it's releasing the need to have every answer right now. It might be as simple as pausing and saying to yourself, I don't have to hold this so tightly. And suddenly, the air feels lighter. The world opens up a little. Because when you let go of what was never yours to keep, your hands are free to catch what was always meant for you. And here's the beautiful paradox. The less you cling, the deeper you connect. The more you release, the fuller you feel. Because now, you're no longer chasing after life. You're standing in the middle of it, fully here, fully open, letting it come, letting it go, letting it be. And in that space, where you no longer need to grip every moment, you discover a peace you didn't know was possible. A steady, quiet joy that isn't dependent on what stays or leaves. Because now you've remembered who you are beyond what you own, beyond what you've lost, beyond what you hope to gain. And as you keep walking this path of non-attachment, something extraordinary happens. You stop fearing endings. You stop chasing beginnings. You learn to trust the flow of life. And in the middle of it all, in the beauty and the mess and the heartbreak, you realize you're okay, more than okay, you're free. Somewhere beneath the noise, beneath the shifting moods, the rising worries, the endless stream of plans and memories, there's a place inside you that doesn't move, a still point, unshaken, untouched. It's been there since the beginning. It doesn't age. It doesn't get anxious. It doesn't crave attention. And yet, most of us forget it exists. We spend so much of our lives chasing after solid ground out there, in relationships, in careers, in numbers and names and titles. We keep thinking, if I could just fix this one thing, then I'd feel okay. But here's the truth. The world will always move. People will disappoint you. Circumstances will shift. The things you thought you couldn't live without, someday you will. And the peace you're searching for won't be found by rearranging the pieces of your outer world. It's been waiting inside you all along. The ancient sages knew this. They spoke of it as the unshakable self. A place within that isn't born, doesn't die, and can't be broken by circumstance. You might call it consciousness, or awareness, or your true nature. Whatever name you give it, the experience is unmistakable. It's the quiet you feel in the middle of a storm, the strange calm that arises when everything falls apart, and yet some deeper part of you whispers, "I'm still here." It's the steady flame that flickers but never goes out. And here's the beautiful thing, you don't have to create it. You only have to remember it. Every time you pause and turn inward, every time you close your eyes and let the world fall away for a moment, every time you watch a thought come and go without chasing it, you're coming home to it. That's still point. And the more you visit it, the easier it is to find. You'll begin to notice how much of your suffering comes not from what happens, but from your resistance to it. From believing you are your thoughts, you are your emotions, you are your circumstances, but you're not. You are the one who observes it all. And when you anchor yourself in that awareness, something incredible happens. The chaos can swirl around you and you remain steady. Fear can knock on your door and you don't have to invite it in. Loss can touch your life, but it won't take you with it, because you've tasted something deeper. And no matter what the world takes from you, it cannot take this. This is why the old masters smiled in the face of difficulty, why some people, even in their final days, radiate peace. They weren't untouched by life. They simply remembered who they truly were, and you can too. It starts in the smallest ways, a breath, a moment of stillness, a reminder to watch rather than react. When anger rises, notice it. When anxiety tightens your chest, feel it. When joy sweeps in, savor it, and then let it all pass. Like clouds moving through an endless sky, you are not the clouds, you are the sky, spacious, unbound, endlessly vast. And in that realization, you'll find a peace the world can't give you and can never take away. You'll stop needing every moment to be perfect. You'll stop waiting for the future to save you. You'll stop defining yourself by what you have or who stays or what happens next, because now you're resting in the unshakable, the still point inside you. And from here, life looks different, not easier, not free of challenge, but more spacious, more gentle, because you've remembered that no matter what storms roll through the surface of your life, deep down, there's a place untouched by it all. And when you know how to find it, you'll never truly be lost again. So keep walking, keep softening, keep listening, because the more you turn toward this inner steadiness, the more it becomes your natural home. And as we near the end of this journey together, there's one final truth to remember, one that we'll explore in our closing chapter. Not as an ending, but as a beginning. So here we are. After walking through the shifting landscapes of change, fear, letting go, and rediscovering the stillness within, we arrive at a simple, yet often overlooked truth. Uncertainty isn't your enemy, it's your teacher. It always has been. Every time life unraveled your careful plans. Every time the thing you clung to slipped through your fingers. Every time you stood at a crossroads, not knowing which way to turn. You were being invited to wake up. Not to the life you wanted, but to life as it is, ever-changing, unpredictable, wildly alive. And while the mind insists on certainty, on knowing what comes next, on securing guarantees, the heart knows something deeper. That what makes this life so breathtaking is precisely its impermanence. The blooming flower destined to wither. The beloved voice you'll one day hear for the last time. The fleeting, precious moment you'll never live again. And if you allow it, uncertainty strips away your illusions, your attachments, your need for control. Until all that remains is the raw, honest, sacred experience of being here. Right now, not in the past you can't rewrite. Not in the future you'll never fully predict, but in this moment. The one place life is always waiting for you. And in that space, something beautiful happens. You begin to soften, to stop fighting what you can't hold on to. To love more fiercely, knowing nothing lasts forever. To savor the ordinary because someday it will be a memory. Uncertainty teaches you how to live, not as a frightened, defensive observer, but as a fully present participant. One breath at a time, one step at a time. It teaches you to trust that even when the path disappears beneath your feet, you'll find your way. That you are far more resilient, spacious, and luminous than you've ever been told. And if you can sit quietly within the unknown, if you can lean into its emptiness, you'll discover that it isn't empty at all. It's alive. It's pulsing with potential. It's the canvas on which every possibility is painted. And you are not a passive victim of its unpredictability. You are a co-creator within it. You get to choose how you meet each moment, with fear or with curiosity, with clinging or with grace, with resistance or with a soft, open hand. And maybe, just maybe, the greatest peace you'll ever know won't come from finally having all the answers, but from being at ease with the fact that you never will. Because in that surrender you become free, free to live, free to feel, free to lose and love again, free to meet whatever rises with an unshaken heart. That's the gift of uncertainty, not as something to be conquered, but as a quiet, patient teacher that walks with you every day, whispering. You don't have to know what comes next. You only have to be here now. And so, as this journey closes, may you remember, the still point is within you. The storms will pass, and even in the midst of chaos, you are home, always. Thank you for walking this path with me. Until next time, stay grounded, stay open, stay human.